Hello, my name is Matthew Liviano, and for my Insight 2026 project, I shadowed Ashley Webb, which is the museum curator at the Winston Link Museum in downtown Roanoke. So the reason I chose museum as my field is ever since I was a child, I always loved going to museums and learning about history. Like for example, when I lived in Texas, I went to the Natural Science Museum, history museums, and art museums there, and I did like summer programs when I was a kid. So ever since a young age, I always was really interested in museums, and I loved dinosaurs and archaeology. And I remember I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was a young kid. So what we did at the Winston Link History Museum was mainly I would work in the archive room, and I would accession items into the museum's archive, which is we get new items and then we enter them into this database where you can see a bunch of Virginia historical items. So some examples of things I accessioned were property documents from Roanoke, books, handwritten letters from soldiers at war back home. And for the most part, all these letters and books and documents are from the Roanoke area. So it was super cool seeing property documents from the 1800s and letters from the 1800s, things like that. But honestly, the thing I did the most was actually do photo scans of photo negatives, and I would accession those. So I would scan them, and then they'd be uploaded onto the portal where we enter in the information. And then from there, I would have to write detailed descriptions of what's happening in the photo, and I'd have to talk about the condition of the photo. So what a typical day would look like as a museum intern is, I'd come in at 10 a.m., I'd log into the website where I would accession items, and I would typically be working on a box. So Ashley Webb would give me a box of things that I could go through, and in one particular example of it would be I got a box from a soldier in the Korean War, and he had souvenirs that looked like this from East Asia, where he was stationed. And he would also have letters that he wrote to his wife, as well as garments that he would wear while in the army. So, he had a pair of boots that I accessioned. He had a medical sash, things like that. And I'd have to measure out the dimensions of everything and put down the size of each item. As far as museum size goes, Winston Link is a very small museum opposed to a very large one. And I'd just like to draw a few comparisons that I learned from my time at Winston Link. So at larger museums, you're going to see up to 300 full-time staff. But at Winston Link at the Winston Link Museum, Ashley Webb was the only full-time staff. So everyone else is part-time there. So I think it's pretty cool how she runs the entire show. There are entire departments at larger museums dedicated to very specific things, while at the smaller museum I worked at, Ashley basically did everything. She curated the museum, and she just did a little bit of everything. She was all over the place instead of larger museums having intensive departments for specific tasks. Larger museums, they work 9 to 5 hours. I'm sure some people do overtime, but what Ashley was telling me was there are not really typical hours at the Winston Link History Museum. Like, of course, she works during the day, but she'll work overtime a lot, work weird hours, just trying to fit together things with unconventional time frames, because she's all over the place. And at larger museums, you're going to see a history museum and a science museum where they encapsulate a lot of different subcategories of those fields, while at the Winston Link Museum, the entire thing is about this one specific trained photographer in the Roanoke area from a long time ago, and it basically displays his photography. Of course, there are other things at the museum as well, but this museum is a lot more niche than some larger museums. So I'll just go through the process of accepting donations. So a box will come in from someone who donates things to the museum, and each item is determined if it's worth keeping or not. And then from there, we'll have the item accessioned, and then only if it's very special, we'll decide to go ahead and put it on exhibit. So one of the things that I did in the job was condition reporting, and it's definitely one of the more tedious things and, in my opinion, slightly boring things that we did at the museum. So condition reporting is a process in the museum world where you have to make notes of each and every error, scratch, mark, imperfection of an item before we put it up on exhibit. And it's done for insurance and liability purposes to ensure the item is of quality and to make a permanent record of the exact condition of the artifact before it's put up. And that's really just so we aren't accused of accidentally damaging something. So as soon as it comes in, we'll make notes of it so no one can accuse us of accidentally damaging any items. It was a tedious part of the process, but it is very important. So as a reflection of my entire experience, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to work with Ashley Webb over the summer and get immersed in the field of museum history. And it led me to a few key insights. First of them being I gained a newfound appreciation for museums that will stick with me for the rest of my life. I now understand the intricacies and the detail-oriented nature of museums in a way that I never understood before. So that was really cool. And there's just so much more to museum work than selecting exhibits. Like most of the time I was accessioning items and working with items that weren't on exhibit. I was working with items that may never be seen by the public eye. So that's just a part of museums you really don't see very often. And most importantly, I learned that while I really do have a strong love for museums, I discovered that working in the museum field as a career, as a profession, is just personally not for me. I see myself maybe working in a museum later in life, but as far as it is right now, it's not a passion of mine. And perhaps as I get closer to retirement or something like that, I can pursue museum work or get into academics. So my next step, as it is right now, is I'll be attending Duke University on a Naval ROTC scholarship, which basically pays for my tuition as long as I promise to commission as an officer in the military. And I plan on studying political science or economics at Duke. And I plan on serving 8 to 12 years in the Navy, but it's not out of the possibility that I could serve the full 20 and then retire from the Navy. Afterwards, I'd like to get my MBA and pursue consulting or something in finance. And maybe towards my retirement, I would be interested in getting into museum work because it really is a passion of mine, working with historical items and things of that sort. But as far as it is right now in my next step, I don't quite see museum work as something that's right for me. But I was really appreciative of Ashley inviting me in as an intern, and it's going to be an experience I'll be telling stories about for the rest of my life. So thank you, Ashley, and that was my museum project.